Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Donna Fiesel, and I'm your host of Donna's Edge Talk Show, where truth matters. We are your Fox News affiliates, and you can find us on television, channel 182, Charter Communications Abundant Television, syndicated, found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. And don't forget the podcast on thenewscasters.com. You can find us on all the social media sites. Well, that's facebook.com/D as in Donna Fiesel. And you can also continue sending emails. Definitely appreciate that. Our 20-year celebration is this month. And the first show was actually aired on April 1st. I would choose April 1st, wouldn't I? Don Brown is with us. He's an attorney, one of my good friends, and also candidate for U.S. Senate. And I'll tell you, I'm glad you're running. We need more folks like you, Don.
Well, thank you, Donna. We do need more patriots in the Senate and the House, and the real question is, where do we go from here? You know, we're in a period of conservative euphoria ever since January the 20th because so much has gone right, but we still see that we're in the middle of a battle. We're seeing these communist judges literally usurp their constitutional authority. This judge up in New York, in D.C., ordering the president to turn a plane around full of criminals that had been expelled from the country under Immigration Act. Judge has no authority. Another judge in D.C. Named Reyes, ordering the president to stand down off of his decree, which he has the right to do as commander-in-chief, that we stop recruiting transgender military. So we're still in the middle of it. But yes, I am running for the U.S. Senate and primarying Tom Tillis, who is kind of an anti-Trumper. Republican, unfortunately, and so I'm not in my normal studio today. I've been on the road in Winston-Salem and have just gotten back into the Charlotte area. So I'm broadcasting today on the fly from Tez Montana Grill here in Waverly. So we do the best we can. So thanks for your patience with me today, Donna.
Oh, absolutely. Good old Charlotte, North Carolina. We are loving being back in the Carolinas, by the way. This is God's country.
It is God's country, and what's it that said, proud to be an American Southerner by the grace of God, or something like that, So that's the way I feel about the Carolinas, so North and South Carolina especially. So we're glad to have you back in the neighborhood for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I hope to come to some of your events pretty soon. We're still living out of boxes, and I suspect that'll be a little while. But anyway, I'm ready to get back into things, and I'm so glad again that you're running. You couldn't have a better patriot to run for U.S. Senate in your neck of the woods. I mean, you are it. I've been following, of course, I've always followed you on Facebook, but I saw something you put on here I thought was extremely, and we're talking about tariffs here, okay, about sending money to other countries when North Carolina is still basically in ruins.
Right.
How can we get to this point?
I made a post, and I really feel this is correct, that not one dime of foreign aid should be spent until North Carolina is rebuilt. And of course, North Carolina has been devastated by Hurricane Helene. The Democrat governor at the time was absolutely out of control by doing nothing. The Democrat president did nothing. They sat around for days when they could have both had Chinook helicopters dropping in the very next day. They could have helicopters dropping the very next day, and also could have brought supplies in, generators, food, and we're just really disgusted by this. So no more foreign aid until the victims in North Carolina have been restored, and not just in North Carolina, but we'll say in Southern California as well. I know there are a bunch of liberal nutcases out there, but they're conservatives as well. But they are Americans, and so I did post that and have gotten some feedback that's very similar to your feedback, and I meant every word of it, Donna.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention this too, what happened with the hurricane there. I know if not for organizations like the Cowboy Church, American Fellowship of Cowboy Churches, and Philip Gilliland is one of my friends, and he is with that organization. He calls so disgusted. So they bring their chuck wagons, and they're bringing all kinds of food, water, what have you. They're turned away by FEMA. They said, stop. And they wanted to confiscate everything. And I'm gonna tell you what, you don't want to butt heads with the Cowboy Church. That ain't gonna happen. So anyway, they got their food and everything through there, but he was so disgusted. He called me and he said, I just have to tell you what I just went through right here. And I told him about you, and I said, well, I'll tell you, we got some good folks in North Carolina. Don't be disgusted with North Carolinians because of FEMA.
Well, the Cowboy Church is to be commended. The Cajun Navy down out of Louisiana has been up. Franklin Graham's organization, Samaritan's Purse. My friend Lee Brown out of Cabarrus County organizing relief efforts. It's been all hands on deck from these wonderful organizations. And be sure to remind your friend, the Cowboy Church, that FEMA is not North Carolina. FEMA is part of the corrupt deep state. You know, one thing that I've been pointing out over and over again on the campaign trails of recent is that if Doe just showed us any one thing, it is this, that the deep state of the federal government is a corrupt, racketeering, criminal enterprise. And FEMA is right there at the forefront of that criminality. In fact, one of the things that makes me the angriest in terms of all of the wasteful, cancerous, putrid types of spending that they've done with our money, it comes from FEMA in that they have spent millions and millions of dollars to house illegal aliens in fancy Manhattan hotels, while we have not just North Carolina is still suffering from Hurricane Helene, but also we have veterans that are dying on the streets. And you know, this deep state has got to be taken down, Donna. We cannot have status quo anymore. We've got to take it down. We've got to cut the money. And as I've been saying again on the trail, and I'll say it with you, it's time to end the Internal Revenue Service, to end it, to repeal it, not just to end the Department of Education, but also the Internal Revenue Service, and to repeal the federal income tax code. No more income taxes. You and I both have discussed this. I'm in favor of this fair tax concept that Governor Huckabee is behind. Stop taxing people for production. Consumption taxes in limited form are much, much fairer. But, you know, it's interesting because, you know, when we had the biggest period of industrial explosion in this country from the 1880s and 1913, when they passed the 16th Amendment, as President Trump was talking about in his interview with Joe Rogan, there was zero income tax at all. We don't really need it. We need to get to the point that we don't need any income tax at all, or even any consumption tax for that matter, and rely totally on tariffs. At this point, the IRS has got to go. They've used this income tax system to fuel this cancer, to fuel this waste, and to fuel all these abuses of the American people for their own, leftist aims and desires and communistic objectives. And it's got to come to an end.
It has to. Well, and I want to talk about tariffs in just a few minutes, because most of the emails that have come for your benefit, people are just all confused about tariffs, that kind of thing. And I wanted to say this: I appreciate your service to our country. Let's talk a little bit about your background and why you should be in the U.S. Senate.
Well, it'll be up to the citizens of North Carolina to decide whether I should be in the U.S. Senate or not. I can tell you my background, however, as first as a military officer, I've been involved in fighting in the last 10 years on multiple fronts on issues that have been very, very on the very forefront of the leftist attempted takeover of our nation. So, for example, battling on behalf of veterans, I was involved in the very high-profile case of Lieutenant Clint Lawrence, who was pardoned by President Trump in 2019. That case got lots of national attention. Also was involved in writing the book on and leading the investigation into Extortion 17 shoot down in 2011. You have mentioned that. You've been kind enough to mention the book, Call Sign Extortion 17. That was turned into a movie. And these were like 30 Americans, including 17 members of SEAL Team 6, who were shot out of the air in Afghanistan in 2011. It appears that they were sacrificed. I've been working with family members there to get answers. We helped the House Armed Services Committee lead an investigation into that in 2017. The Democrats took over in 2020. That came to an end. Have also been involved in litigation against these illegal vaccination mandates. I brought major federal litigation against the Savannah River nuclear plant in South Carolina on behalf of 78 or 79, 80 plaintiffs, many of them nuclear engineers who did not want to take the illegal jab. We sued the plant in federal court, went to the Fourth Circuit before Biden backed down. I've also been involved in the battle against election fraud, especially in the 2020 election. Got involved on 3 separate legal teams, including the team Sidney Powell worked on, and another team that wound up, Ken Paxton wound up filing suit against Pennsylvania. I was in the initial ground for that team as well. So I've been involved in a lot of the red hot issues that really go to the questions of whether or not we're going to survive as a constitutional republic or succumb to totalitarianism. So I've been involved in the fight, and I'm looking forward to taking the fight to another level. But we've got to have bold leadership in the Congress. When I mean the Congress, I mean the House and the Senate. We've got to have bold, visionaries saying it's time to end the income tax. We cannot continue to go on with business as usual. The Democrats say, "Oh, make the rich pay their fair share." But here's the thing, Donna. As I pointed out earlier today, we got a $37 trillion national debt, and every nation that has been the great nations on the face of the earth throughout history, whether the Romans, the Spanish, the Dutch, the British, have all had a currency that is the national dominant currency internationally. And we have the U.S. dollar. Every time one of those nations lost their currency because of overspending, they lost their status as being the preeminent nation in the world. And we gotta be very, very strong here. We gotta have radical transformation. And so I'm hoping that the voters of North Carolina will recognize that. I think everybody understands this tax day stuff. My dear, sweet, wonderful ex-mother-in-law, 85 years old the other day, was sweating because she was having to figure out how to do her taxes. No 85-year-old should have to do that. And not only should not have to do it, nobody should have to fill out a 1040. This has got to come to an end. What you do, if you want to end the deep state, you suck it of its energy, you suck it of its money, and you do that by ending the income tax system, because it's the income tax system that has enabled deep state communism, and it's got to come to an end. I hope that answered your question.
It did. And again, a true patriot. I wanted to mention this. Now, of course, the Senate and the Congress has to change. We have to have patriots. I'm talking about on the Republican end. In the state of Alabama, Phil and I were glad to leave, and I'll have to tell you why. I was born there. That was my home for many, many years. But the governor there, Kay Ivey, was a Democrat until recent years. And she pretends she doesn't know why there are so many illegals in Alabama. But they were getting way too close for home. You couldn't go to a bank without all of the illegals in the bank. I mean, they're just like we owe them something. And before somebody starts, my daughter-in-law is from Russia, okay? But she's an American citizen. She came in the right way. And she was brought here when she was 11 years old. So before that argument gets started, I love everybody from all nations, but I also believe you should go in the right way. I wouldn't go to Uganda and expect them to live their life like mine. So how do we resolve this? How do we get them? Just because they put an R on their name, I know you're a patriot, but I'm talking about some of the people who are in office now. We need to get those folks out, get folks like you in.
Well, Donna, obviously, sometimes it is easier said than done, because they say one thing and they get in the office and do a flip-flop. Yeah. But to a large degree, we can judge them by their track record. We can judge them by their track record. Senator Tillis, for example, in 2019, when President Trump was talking about, declaring an emergency at the border, Senator Tillis writes an op-ed in the Washington Post to oppose that. When the Democrats were successful in pushing this Muellergate, Robert Mueller was unconstitutionally appointed. He should never have been allowed to move forward. And even if he had been constitutionally appointed, it was the whole scam was a political prosecution which should never have taken place, violating the Constitution. Senator Tillis voted to give legal protection to an illegal prosecutor. So you have to kind of look at track records, and you look at track records, and you say, is this person's track record, pushing a globalist agenda, or they want to give billions and billions and billions to Ukraine when our own Americans are suffering? Are they America first? And it takes our people doing homework. But Jefferson said, Donna, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. This is part of the eternal vigilance that we have to undergo in order to better discern who it is we're putting into Congress. Because President Trump will most likely be gone in 4 years. We know we have 2 years for Republican Congress with him. We've got to start preparing now for making sure the America First movement carries on as a bright torch into the future. Because I can tell you that the rhinos and the Democrats are just biding their time. They want to go right back to status quo. They want to go back to one world orderism. They want to go back to the deep state taking our money and sucking it up for all kinds of leftist causes. They want to go back to giving money to these 550 NGOs that are left-wing in nature. They want to go back to all of it. And we've got to take them down. And so we've got to be vigilant. We've got to be discerning. We've got to make sure that we get patriots in Congress and demand that patriots speak boldly in Congress. And
that means voting. That means voting. I mean, you have to. And I think we learned a lot this past election season. I think a lot of folks got there and voted who haven't voted in years. And that's why we have Trump right now.
Right. And there's still a lot of conservative votes that are still out there, untapped, waiting to be counted. So we've got to make sure we get to our people, make sure we go into the polls. The Democrats want them to think their vote doesn't matter, and they want to beat us down into believing that we're, whatever they want to call us, the adjective du jour, whether it's election denier or whatever it might be. But we have to understand that they use name calling. But hey, they can call me whatever name they want to call me. But those guys, those Marines at Iwo Jima and the 4th and 5th Marines that stormed the beaches there, the 75th Rangers at Normandy, our guys and women in the military who have taken real bullets, the stuff we're taking is nothing compared to what they've taken. So we've got to resolve ourselves. We've got to be brave about this.
Okay, let's talk about spending money. Okay, thank God for Elon Musk. Thank God for President Trump, J.D. Vance. I mean, he is absolutely awesome. It takes a lot of guts to do that. I would think there has to be 24-hour security around those three men right there, especially.
There's no doubt that Elon's got to have a lot of private security. He's gotten all kinds of death threats. The criticisms against them are like the criticisms against Trump. They're not rational. I mean, all the guy has done is send up his own private spacecraft to rescue American astronauts out of space that the Biden administration either did not have the guts or the technology to do. Elon offered to do it there in Biden. Biden turned it down because he didn't want to give any credence to a Trump reporter. Elon has gone through and discovered wasteful spending, and they're angry about that. The reason that the deep state and the press and the liberals and the rhinos have hated Trump from the beginning is because at the end of the day, he's a threat to their criminal enterprise. He has called out the spending. He's called out all this, and Elon now is a very, very efficient mechanism, which is Elon and this team have become a very efficient mechanism, that is the Doge team, to allow us to uncover a lot of this criminal spending. And so they're at war with us because they represent the side of darkness and the side of oppression, the side of a totalitarianism, the side of stealing from the people to enrich themselves, make themselves more powerful. And so the attacks against him are not rational. There's Trump derangement syndrome. Pretty soon it's going to evolve into Elon derangement syndrome, already attacking Tesla dealerships, burning them down. And isn't it interesting the way what we're seeing? We're seeing Republican headquarters being attacked all over the country. The New Mexico GOP headquarters was attacked a couple of weeks ago. I went up to Durham to speak at the Durham County, North Carolina GOP one Saturday a couple of weeks ago, and that night, those headquarters have been attacked and vandalized. It's interesting that you don't see these attacks against Democrat headquarters. Now, let me just say, I'm glad that we aren't seeing these attacks against Democrat headquarters or Democrat businesses or Democrat establishments. But what we're seeing with these attacks on Tesla dealerships and on GOP headquarters basically are the same taxes that we've seen, really going back to the Bolshevik Revolution. Somebody said, I was in a discussion the other day with a liberal on Facebook, says, what is DEI anyway? Here's what DEI is. First of all, it's divide. It's divide. And then what you do is after you divide, you just enhance that division, and then you inflame the situation. So you divide, you basically enhance difference between people, and you inflame the situation, you set it on fire, and then you come in with the solution to putting out the fire after you started it yourself. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing Trotskyite, we're seeing Stalinist type of tactics, just a type of tactics they started the Bolshevik Revolution. We're battling English-speaking communists, and the sooner we come to the realization that is the case, the better.
You know what? That's a narcissistic platform, and what they do is they gaslight people. And shame them, make them feel like, you don't love people. But the very people who say that are the ones who are destroying property, they're destroying lives, they're trying to kill people. Very people.
What Democrats do is they will create a slogan that is actually the opposite of what they intend. So, for example, the Affordable Care Act is in reality the Astronomical Cost Act, or the Department of Education, which is in reality the Department of Indoctrination. How about that? Or just pick whatever it is. It's opposite of what they say, and then they use, and people fall for it. Unfortunately, you're not going to cut money to the children. You're cutting off the Department of quote unquote. I call it the Department of quote unquote education. There's nothing education about it. Here's another one: the Inflation Reduction Act. The Biden had, which in reality was the Inflation on Steroids Act. So we've got to understand that they use language opposite of what the truth really is. And unfortunately, because our people we got to be more discerning. Too many people are falling for it. But we have to expose them to what they're really doing.
I remember the very, very first time a politician lied, and it was a Democrat. I think it was Joe Biden. Okay, one of them. There's so many of them. And so instead of saying, I'm sorry I lied, he said, I misremembered.
Right, of course.
Misremembered. I remember hearing that word, misremembered. Why, are you trying to sugarcoat it? No, you lied.
Well, people are waking up. We need more people to wake up, Donna. Again, I've said this many times to you. I appreciate what you and Phil are doing with your show and the broadcast. You work with Fox Radio and all the other platforms you're on. Is helping to get the word out. We've got to be more bold about it, and I know that you have been. And the good news is that we now have what had been called alternate media. Your show might have been called alternative media versus the mainstream, but now it is the quote unquote alternative media. It's become the principal source of our information, and that's a cat out of the bag that they've not been able to handle. When you have millions and millions and millions and millions of people watch Joe Rogan's podcast and interview with the president, or when Fox fires Tucker and he explodes and has 100 times the viewership on his podcast than he would have had on Fox. It's a totally different dynamic, but it's a good thing.
It's totally different. Like when The View, how many viewers do you think they actually have?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I would say nothing. Nothing.
It's all
maybe
bigger.
each other.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. They're more bite than bark. The View. I mean, who's going to look at The View anyway? I mean, 20,000
all women getting ahead, but not those women.
Right.
I mean, not them at all. So let's talk a little bit more about, okay, and you and I have discussed this. Anybody with a brain in their head whatsoever who runs a business knows you can't overspend. What you're bringing in is just common sense. So how did we get to the point where we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine or wherever, but we're not helping our own folks here? And we mentioned North Carolina earlier.
Well, there's more money in sending money to Ukraine there is helping people in North Carolina, because you send money to Ukraine. Well, then what you do, you're buying weapons. Defense contractors make money. Bullet manufacturers make money. There's more money. It's kind of like what I call the pharmaceutical governmental complex. When you're buying all these experimental jabs rather than buying ivermectin, Johnson & Johnson makes money. There is no money. There's no money in helping poor, devastated homeowners in North Carolina who've lost everything. So they go where the money is. And these politicians like Tillis and others who are pushing Ukraine, for example, they're going to get their backs scratched by defense contractors, whether it's either directly into their campaign or into political action committees to support them. So there's more money in corruption. I've often heard it said, do the pharmaceutical manufacturers, does the chemotherapy manufacturers really want cancer in it? There's so much money in it. When you go back and look at what happened even in COVID very recently, they lied their tails off. Biden and Fauci said you take the vax, you won't get COVID. It was all experimental. Said it was safe. People have been dying. They will lie for the sake of money. So that's what we're dealing with. But it goes back again. Jefferson saying the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And it's not only just a matter of being vigilant and understanding what's happening, but it's also a matter of speaking out against it. There's safety in numbers, Don. Sometimes I know, you and I felt like it's me and you against the world. I mean, in the middle of COVID, when everybody was falling into line and holding their heads down and wearing masks and taking a jab, we were speaking out against it. We're only a handful of very few who were speaking out against it. But our people have got to be able to speak out and understand that if they say it, they are probably lying. And don't believe what they say. And you make them prove it and check it and double check it and triple check it. So we just got to be more vigilant. We got to be braver in speaking out against this. So, how do we come to this? We came to it, and I've said it before. When the Congress passed the first Income Tax Act after the 16th Amendment was passed in 1913, it created a gravy train. The income tax system has created a gravy train for this corruption. And when the first income tax was passed, it was between 1% and 7%. Now it's exploded, and they are dependent on that system for their gravy train. So how is it you kill a cancer? Well, they say that you deprive it of sugar, you deprive it of oxygen. Well, the way you end the deep state is you deprive it of money. And the way you deprive it of money is you end the income tax system that's feeding it, and you end the Internal Revenue Service that is pushing the income tax system. It's got to be done. We got to be bold about it.
It's been decades of this. And I think a test run was right after Vietnam, when, teams of construction companies went in to rebuild Vietnam. And the deal was, and they didn't even try to hide it. Lady Bird Johnson's business was in on rebuilding it. Go back and check history. I mean, it's been going on for quite a while. And again, not even trying to hide it.
Right. That's correct. It's been out in the open. They don't worry about it. They know that first of all, they know that they've known that the left-wing media, the communist media that's been behind them are going to protect them anyway. So they have to worry about it. It's only in the days now when we have alternative media and podcasts and shows that are being broadcast to the internet are being challenged, and that's why they want to try to shut down your show and others as well, Donna. But information is a powerful thing. Knowledge is power, and it's time to bring it to an end. If we're going to save our country, like I pointed out today in a talk over in Winston-Salem, either we're going to save the country or not. And if we're going to save the country, we've got to take out the deep state. If we're going to take out the deep state, we got to end the income tax system, and we've got to pay down the national debt. Trump, he's instituting these tariffs. He knows that the market's going to react negatively. To heck with the market, Donna. These 401ks, these mutual funds, these individual stocks, they don't care whether there's cheap labor in China making junk products and selling in the United States. They don't care who's doing it as long as it's driving their profit up. So if the profit's up, their stock's going to go up. They could care less whether the borders of the United States are open or closed, or whether we have any more manufacturing jobs. I was in Cabarrus County earlier this week in Concord, home of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, which was once a great textile center. I said, where's our textile industry? And today in Winston-Salem, I asked the same question, where's our furniture industry? Democrat policy and globalism has sucked our manufacturing base out the window. We cannot remain as a superpower, either economically or militarily, if we don't make things. So if the market's got to take a hit, or want to let the market take the hit, it will eventually recover. But we've got to take the medicine and get this job done if we're going to save our country.
Well, Fort Payne, Alabama was once the sock capital of the United States. There were so many, and it was a thriving little area. And now it has been beat to death when all of those jobs went overseas. Somebody made money, and it wasn't the folks in Fort Payne, Alabama.
That's right. The money was sucked out because of NAFTA. The jobs were sucked out because of NAFTA. We made a mistake. We got to fix it. The tariffs are the first step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Let's go into a commercial break. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Thanks.
Everybody hang in there.
Twin City Used Car Sales has been serving drivers in the Northeast Alabama area for years with a quality selection of late model used cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks. On top of our extensive selection and competitive prices, we offer professional auto financing services for used car buyers of all credit levels. Whether you've just begun your search or you're ready to secure your next vehicle, at Twin City Used Car Sales, you will drive away with the vehicle of your dreams. The sales and finance staff at Twin City Used Car Sales looks forward to serving you, and you can apply for financing online before your visit to our used dealership in Gadsden, Alabama. Check us out on the web at twincityusedcars.com or go by our location at 901 First Avenue, Gadsden, Alabama. We sincerely look forward to serving you. At Lamone's Mexican Restaurant, located in Henniger, Alabama, and voted Best Mexican Restaurant of DeKalb County, Alabama 2020, we're here to serve you with authentic Mexican cuisine. Order easily online by going to lamonsmex.com or call 256-657-3999 to place your order. We're open Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whether you're celebrating a cozy date night for two or a celebration for a crowd, at Lamone's you'll love our atmosphere and friendly servers. Thank you for dining with Lamone's Mexican Restaurant.
Are you ready?
We all wonder what tomorrow will bring. But the future lays itself at the feet of the prepared and surrenders to the will of the persistent. It's not easy, but today shapes you so you can shape tomorrow. With Northeast Alabama Community College, when the future asks if you're ready, you can answer.
Yes.
Begin your future at Northeast Alabama Community College.
Donna's Designs offers a line of handmade memorial, wedding, and keepsake jewelry that launched back in 1970. I'm a self-trained jewelry designer, and I will work closely with you to create unique designs you can love and treasure for years to come. Whether that be flowers that were used in a funeral arrangement or stones you found on the beach at a memorable trip, call me at 256-659-4319, and let's think of the possibilities.
At Liberty Bank, we're all about community, whether it's to help with a charity fundraiser or help families in need. Toys at Christmas or a local football team, we're here for you. You see, we realize the importance of family. Sometimes it's to build a new home or necessary home repairs. We're here for you. If you like the feel of a small town bank with all the conveniences of a big city bank, we're here to serve you. You will find us at any of our convenient locations in DeKalb, Marshall, Etowah, and Blount counties in North Alabama. You can call and speak with any of our friendly staff at 256-659-2175 or check us out on the web at libertybankal.com. And thank you for your support of our community. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
I'm excited to announce our Christmas extravaganza is finally here. Get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. They won't last long, so get them while you can. Our famous My Slippers, they haven't been on sale for over a year. Regularly $119.98, now only $59.98. Our 6-piece towel sets are back in stock with extremely limited quantities, only $29.98. With hundreds of MyPillow products, there's something for everyone on your Christmas list. Bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save on all MyPillow products. For example, flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. Or our 6-piece towel sets, just $29.98. But that's not all. I'm extending our 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st of 2025. Plus, all orders over $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Good afternoon. We're back. My name is Donna, and I am your host of Donna's Edge Talk Show, where truth matters, celebrating 20 years. Wow, April 1st, wouldn't it be a good day for that? You know, so Tom Williams gave me my first shot. And I said, when do we start the show? Well, first of all, I said, I don't want to do it. I've never done anything like this before in my entire life. I said, I'll forget my name. I can't do this. He said, let's just try it. I think you'll be a natural. So anyway, we tried it, and he said, okay, when do you want to start? And I said, well, let's do an easy date, something I'm going to remember. And he said, you're right, because you can't even remember your wedding anniversary half the time. And he said, let's do April 1st. You'll always remember. April 1st, April 1st. So we did it, and I'm so glad we did. And thank you, Tom Williams, for making it happen. It's been fun, and I'm still loving it. I have attorney Don Brown. He's an author and a speaker. By the way, how can folks find your books?
Thank you, Donna. And also, I'll echo my thanks and appreciation to Tom Williams. He might have selected April Fool's Day as your anniversary. He was no fool and is a great judge of talent. And we owe him all a great debt. Thank you. My books you can find on DonBrownBooks.com, which is my website, DonBrownBooks.com. Go on Amazon, type me in. Go on Barnes & Noble, type me in, and there we are. You can also email me, DonBrownBooks@gmail.com. If anybody would like to send an autographed book, can work it out.
I'm very proud you're running for Senate. We need folks like you, U.S. Senate. And so you and I have talked about a number of different things. Let's talk a bit about education. And we've said this before, and I think you brought it up first. And it was you could put yourself in a room full of 100 students. You're going to pick the homeschooled ones.
Sure. Right.
Because they are they have the attention. They're not just like their heads filtered with nonsense from the public school system. How can that be turned around?
First off, there is power in competition, and this is true for education as well. But I've given the example, Donna, for example, maybe you viewers can see it. Here's my cell phone right here. So this cell phone of mine, and it's doing all kinds of things. And when my son was overseas in Germany and Afghanistan, in the Army. He's still in the Army, by the way. We finally brought him home for a while. But I could get on the phone and FaceTime and talk to him, and no charge. I could talk to anybody anywhere in the world. If this had been 30 years ago, those charges have been exorbitant. I remember when I was a student at Chapel Hill, and my dad would get on me because I'd call home and talk for 30 minutes, run up a huge phone bill, for a long distance. But what happened? What happened is that Ma Bell got busted up through antitrust. You see, when you take something that's monopolistic, whether it's a phone company or a educational system, and when you bust it up into smaller pieces, that fosters competition. And the reason the homeschoolers have done so well, in large part, is because the smaller the teacher ratio size, the better. So they're getting better individual attention from their parents and others who are involved in the homeschool process. Secondly, they're not subjected to the same types of indoctrinational mandates that the public school kids are having. But we got to find a way that education, the monopolistic hold on education, must be busted up so that there's competition among schools. We've got to. I love teachers. Teachers and RNs are some of the greatest people. My daughter's an RN. I've had teachers in my family. They are God's gift to this country. But the problem is that they're underpaid, they're overworked, and if we were to, eliminate the money that's being paid to these bureaucrats in the school systems, we could raise teacher pay, for example. But we got to find ways of, and the NEA will go after me for saying they need to be busted up. They need to be busted up, and public schools need to be smaller. There need to be more private schools. There needs to be an opportunity for private schools to be able to thrive. And this whole business, one of the biggest sins that the Department of Education is thrust on the educational process. Let me rephrase. The Department of quote unquote education, because it's really the Department of Indoctrination, is attempting to put these government instituted mandates into school systems. I've gone around during the time that they were trying to force Common Core down our throats and lectured on that. They went around basically the school systems and promised them billions of dollars. And that is the Department of Education would promise school systems billions of dollars if they would promise to accept the Common Core curriculum once it was written. The curriculum itself had two components: it had mathematics and language arts. And the working group in D.C., which was funded by Bill Gates. Bill Gates is pushing this, by the way. Had a number of secondary teachers and two university professors. One named Sandy Stotsky from the University of Arkansas. She was overseeing the language arts part. Another, the mathematics part, by Professor Bill Milgram from Stanford. Milgram was a brilliant mathematician, worked on the Apollo moon program. Stotsky as well was brilliant. They both resigned because on the language arts side, Stotsky saw that what it was an indoctrination program. They were getting rid of the great British authors, the great English authors, the great American authors, and replacing it with communist infiltration. And on the math side, Milgram resigned because they were moving the standards of math down in the United States, so that if Common Core had gone through, that the 12th grade would only offer pre-calculus, no longer calculus. So we were 1 year more behind the Asian countries, which is what they're trying to do. They're trying to weaken us so that they can put us into a globalist system. But the Department of Education has been a monstrosity. So back to your question, we got to find ways of busting the educational monstrosity up and having smaller public schools, smaller private schools, more and more schools, and let them compete against one another. And you'll see that a rising tide basically rises all boats.
Okay, this is something that I find is very interesting. And so we've talked about this several times on the show. And this is the Alabama. I'm picking on Alabama today because I know more about that particular state right now than South Carolina. But right. The State Board of Education, the superintendent makes a bigger salary than the president of the United States.
Right.
I find that a bit odd.
Well, this goes back to the point I'm making, is the education bureaucracy. These superintendents making more money than the president of the United States. I have a friend of mine who was a Spanish teacher, still is a Spanish teacher in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public Schools. She's told me that she's in the middle of her class and some bureaucrat from downtown walks in and tries to take her to class, tell her what to do, blah, 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 waste a whole day, then leaves and she goes back to teaching Spanish. But you've got to eliminate eliminating the bureaucracy in education is the first major step that can take place. And then finding the ways of, taking out the influence of the NEA and making schools smaller and more responsive to parents, and more responsive to the needs of the country, and less responsive to centralized planning through these core curricula. It's what we're going to have to do to try to improve our education system.
But so much fluff is in the school systems, things we just really don't need. I'm into going back to the basics: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
That's right. And if it doesn't support reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, we got to have history, but it's got to be history that is objective, not left-wing history. And foreign language study is as well. If it's not in that, forget it. The other thing, we've got to change our thinking on university education and secondary education. We have been trained to look down our noses on the trades and crafts, and that's just an abomination. I mean, an electrician, a plumber, a welder, those folks are just as important. In fact, more important than, I would say, those degrees are more important than, a sociology degree from Harvard. I mean, I need an electrician more than I need a Harvard sociologist. And so we're going to have to start. We got to, the liberal arts is fine in its place. We've got to go back to the trades. We have to encourage the trades. We have to make kids feel good about going into trades, and we got to go into computer programming as well. We've got to go into skill teaching that helps the nation grow and stay competitive on an international stage. And there has to be there's got to be radical transformation in our educational philosophy in order for all this to happen.
Well, I'll have to tell you this. There was a time when your mother wanted you to marry a doctor or an attorney. Now
Right.
your mother wants you to marry a plumber. Do you know they're the fastest growing millionaires in the United States?
I do not doubt that at all. And the mama's got good sense. If she says, don't marry the lawyer, marry the plumber. Trust me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I always thought that was pretty interesting, how things can take a turn, And again, we get, like you just said, we've got to have the trades. There needs to be education also in how people spend their money at home. I'm not telling, you don't tell people how to spend their money. I'm just saying people need to know about budgets. They need to know the simple things of debits and credits, those things.
Money management is something that's not taught, nor are the consequences of mismanaging money taught. The dangers of bankruptcy aren't taught. The dangers of overextending in credit cards are not taught. It should be taught as basic part of our math curricula. Our kids our population needs to know this. And again, but Donna, it goes back, there has to be a major transformational thinking in educational philosophy. Right now, educational philosophy is governed by the now shrinking Department of quote unquote education and the big teachers unions such as the NEA. They want power. They're using education as an excuse to amass power and money. But power and money is not what education is about. Teaching and learning is what it's about. You go back to the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, and then practical skills, good stuff like we're seeing in the trades needs to be emphasized. Money management needs to be emphasized. The U.S. Constitution needs to be emphasized. And I've been saying this for quite some time. Teach the Constitution in grades K through 12. Make kids memorize it. Memorize the Constitution for how it's written. And study the Federalist Papers without this living, breathing thing crap that the Democrats have tried to come up with as an excuse to change the Constitution. All this needs to happen. And but you got to lay the vision out for the vision to be executed.
Not only kids, but a lot of adults don't know this. Okay, you have a 30-year mortgage. Make one extra payment per year, just one. Make one. You're shaving years off of that house payment, and you're saving so much money in interest. It's incredible. Of course, your banks wouldn't want you to teach that, but I'm just saying, I'm telling every kid I know, just make $100 extra per month on your house payment. Just do that, and you'll see it. I mean, it's such a huge savings.
The magic of compound interest, exactly. It should be taught every day. Now, I was never taught that in school. I learned it later. I was never taught it in school. And but we got to change the way we're thinking. That goes to practical money management. There should be taught courses on practical money management and how to avoid debt and the consequences of debt. All that needs to be emphasized. And right now, there's a big vacuum there on those topics.
Let's talk about our military, because right now there are record numbers of people who are joining the military since President Trump came in. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, my friend Pete Hegseth, I believe, is going to be the greatest Secretary of Defense in this nation's history. I know the guy. I know his heart. He thinks like we think. The very first day he arrived at the Pentagon, he called Fort Bragg before he later officially and legally changed it 2 days later. Just this past week, he's gotten away with substandard PT training, which was watered down to accommodate women in combat positions. And if a woman's going to be in a combat position, you have to be able to deal with the same training the Navy SEALs are dealing with. No, don't water it down because lives are dependent on it. So the troops know that President Trump is a commander-in-chief for the troops, for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and I guess Guardians now in the Space Force. But the troops know that there's a commander-in-chief who's got their back, and the troops know that there's a Secretary of Defense who has their back. There has been a very concerted effort, and rightly so, to weed out these Obama and Biden generals and admirals who've kissed up to DEI and done things to weaken the military. So you're seeing an immediate reflection in the recruiting numbers because of this. No longer are we seeing some of these ridiculous, recruiting ads the Army and Navy are putting out showing dudes wearing dresses. My God, what kind of
That's
crap
incredible.
A dude wearing a dress in a Navy recruiting is absolutely embarrassing and despicable. And we are turning the military into a macho organization again, which is what it's got to be. And I make no apologies for saying that. And because we got to have the meanest, baddest, most lethal fighting force on the face of the earth, you don't do it by turning the military into a guinea pig experiment, which is what the Democrats have tried to do.
Let's talk a little bit more, and you've touched on this. Let's talk a bit more about fair tax, because I'm just telling you, I'm a huge cheerleader for fair tax because it does so many things. You get rid of the IRS, they're gone. People can run a small business and not worry about, if I say something the wrong way, am I going to lose my business? It's been used as a weapon.
Well, the first and most powerful thing about fair tax, which distinguishes it from flat tax, is that fair tax ends the IRS. It ends the federal income tax system. So we have an income tax system based upon production that punishes production. The better you and Phil do, the more you produce, the more they want to take. They punish you for producing. So fair tax, by ending the IRS, which has to happen, would do that. Fair tax is a consumption tax. In other words, you would probably add maybe 5% as a national sales tax, but no one is punished for what they make. It's fair all the way across the board. And it is being used in several prominent nations now, including Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia no longer has an income tax. They got a fair tax. A couple of other Middle Eastern countries, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, also use a fair tax, and they're doing just fine. Frankly, if you ended the IRS and went with tariffs altogether, you might not even need the fair tax. You might not even need that at all. But certainly, as a transitional maneuver, it will be incredible. And think about this, Donna, from ending the IRS. One of the things that we've seen from the tariffs that the president is imposing already, where he's just trying to even the score, where these other nations have taxed the heck out of us on tariffs, we let them slide. He's trying to even the score. I saw this morning that 50 nations have called in the White House. We had several already agreeing to zero tariff exchange, Argentina being one, and several others as well. But if you were to eliminate the income tax, the president's trying to bring American jobs back into the country by using tariffs, and it's working. But if you eliminate the income tax, which means you're eliminating income tax on corporations also, think how fast all those companies that left would come flying back into this country. Think how fast that would happen. And we wouldn't have any type of revenue problem. The revenue situation would explode. But the income tax system was set up in large part so the government can get information on you. They're forcing you to think about it. The income tax system inherently forces you either to file a tax return. If you don't file a tax return, you can get prosecuted for failure to file. Then if you do file a tax return and make a mistake, you get prosecuted for tax fraud, even if it's a mistake. So what type of system forces American citizens in a situation where they're potentially going to be prosecuted, and damned if they do and damned if they don't? That's our income tax system. It's got to go. Fair tax is the way to go. You can go to fairtax.org, and Governor Huckabee and some others who are pushing this have a couple of nice little 1-2 minute videos to help explain it probably better than I have. But it's something that we need to move to, and we need to do it sooner rather than later.
Phil and I were living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sarah Palin came in. We had I was a member of the Tea Party. Right. And so we were out at the courthouse having a peaceful demonstration, a peaceful one. So Phil calls and he said, "You better get home." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, all the demonstration that's going on down there." And I was looking around. There's no demonstration. What are you talking about? Well, you know how liberal the media is in Charlotte.
Right, sure,
It can be terrible. So I don't know where they were getting this footage from, but they were dragging people off on, and all this kind of. I said, "There's nothing like that going on. I swear, nothing like that at all." Okay, so we've always been told keep your tax, keep all of your receipts, keep everything for 7 years. So we moved back to Alabama, and this was in 2013. So in 2014, I get a letter from the IRS telling me I owe 10 grand. So I'm calling them, trying to be really nice to the person on the end of the other end. And I said, "What's this $10,000 about?" They went back 15 years. I thought you could only go back 7. I was being weaponized because I was a member of the Tea Party. I didn't know that at the time, but I was. So it was left up to me, and thank God Phil did not listen to me because we were moving, and I said, "Get rid of all that stuff. We just need to keep stuff from the past 7 years." And Phil said, "I don't trust the government. I'm keeping it." And I said, "But we don't need that junk. It's extra boxes of just stuff." I'm glad he kept it because had he not, I wouldn't have had the proof we paid that. They said we owed for W-2s or so. I forgot what it was. And it started out, they guessed that it would be like around a little bit over $2,000. Interest and penalties wound up being $10,000.
Well, they make stuff up out of the blue, knowing you probably don't have the records anymore. They just make it out of the blue and order you to pay it. This system must come
to
a raging stop and to a halt. It's got to go. That is tyranny against an American citizen. And the federal government should not be a weapon of tyranny against Americans. It's time to end the IRS once and for all, forever, and amen.
However, you can be illegal, come in and get all kinds of subsidies.
Of course you can. You come in and as an illegal, and FEMA's going to give you a nice hotel in downtown Manhattan while our American veterans are dying on the streets and while our fellow North Carolinians still, some of them don't have their homes back.
Okay, how can this be put in place and how long would it take to actually put fire tax in place?
It's going to take a Congress passing it. The issue, the answer to your question, how long it take to put in place, could happen tomorrow. If Mike Johnson can muster the votes for it, and if John Thune can muster the votes for it. But here's the problem. As I've been pointing out in the last several days, we've had weak Congress system, weak Republican Congresses, I have to say. It was the Republican Congress that failed to overturn Obamacare. Republican Congresses have passed continuing resolutions that can continue to drive the national debt. The issue is the political will. This goes back to why we've got to identify patriots and send them to Congress. We can't just continue to go with the status quo and save our country. The answer to your question, it could happen tomorrow, Donna. Will it happen tomorrow? Looks in the Senate, you've got a few conservatives, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee. Then you have the Susan Collinses and the Melissa Murkowskis and the Tom Tillises and the John Cornyns and the Bill Cassidys. And the list goes on. You have 5 or 6 rhinos in the Senate that vote with the Democrats half the time. So we've got to get those people out. And we got to get people that love the country and are determined to turn us back to constitutional rule. We got to do it. We got to be bold about it.
So from my studies on fair tax, if one state went with it, I'm telling you, there would be such a massive growth. The state of Alabama, there are people who live there who have been trying to make this happen for years. But if one state did this, and one state could do this, you would get so much business. I mean, all of the businesses would leave. That's why I'm wondering if Trump is putting something together like a fair tax. Is that what tariffs are? Well,
Bannon made a comment the other day that he believes that Trump's move to tariffs is aimed at eventually eliminating the income tax. Okay, Trump hasn't said that, but I could see that. Trump knows. I think if you went straight to tariffs, there was not again, as I've said on a number of occasions, from the 1880s to 1913, during the Industrial Revolution, when this country exploded, there was zero income tax, only tariffs. You might be able to go even without a fair tax, because the fair tax is designed to replace revenues lost from an income tax on a fairer basis without getting the government involved in everybody's affairs invading privacy and going back 15 years for you and try to go after you because you're Tea Party. But I think, I haven't heard what Trump has said about fair tax, but I can tell you he doesn't like the income tax. And I believe that Bannon may be onto something. Is Trump is at least trying to steer us in the direction where we don't see it. If the income tax is gone together, then the question is, do you replace it with a fair tax or just leave it gone and forever and rely on tariffs? That's the question. But to the extent that it's going to be replaced, the fair tax is what I would wholly support.
Okay, heaven forbid, say something happens to President Trump. How close do you think J.D. Vance would be to just going on over changing hats? I mean, how do you think he would carry on what Trump has in place?
Well, he seems extremely impressive, extremely brilliant. He seems to be able to he has his arms around all these issues. He is he stood boldly against Ukraine, the money boondogging of Ukraine before others did. I think he's ready for prime time. Wish he had a few years under him, but I think he's ready for prime time. I mean, I really do.
Yeah, but you either have it or you don't. And I think he's got it.
I agree.
Like you.
Thank you, Don.
You got it.
JD's in office, but I'm not. But thank you very much.
Yeah, but let's say you are in office. What would you do on the first day?
Probably go to the well of the Senate and make a speech challenging my colleagues to put legislation on the floor to end the Internal Revenue Service as we know it. Probably that. Probably. I'm going to set forth benchmark goals, which may or may not be accomplished because of the political reality in the Senate. But we got to be bold about these each and every day. We got to be We got to be out there trumpeting the message. And that's what I want to be doing.
I'm seeing a new group of people emerge. I'm seeing a difference in the younger people who are coming up right now. I think they're fed up with their parents.
Right.
I really do. And I think they see it's not right. I mean, something is just not right about this whole situation. But I'm seeing groups of younger people who I think are getting it.
I agree with you, Donna. You got Trump is extremely popular amongst the young voters. The Democrats don't know what to do with that. They're at an all-time low in their popularity, and they keep trying the same stupid stuff. They're going out and screaming and yelling, no, we won't go. And, the people united will never be defeated. And whatever type of, communistic sloganisms they have harped about over the years, burning Tesla dealerships, attacking GOP headquarters, they just go back to the same old ways. And you're right. A lot of young people are seeing through the garbage and they're coming on board the right way. So we've got to be optimistic about that.
Yeah, I think there's hope. A little bit less than 3 minutes left in the segment. What would you like to tell the folks before we go? Well,
I think that, we're in a crucial time in this country. The last, month or two since January 20th, it's been like Christmas every day. This administration has rolled out more quickly and more effectively than any administration in history. Donald Trump is larger than life, but at the same time, we got to remember Jefferson's called the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We got to be prepared to put patriots into Congress who are going to carry this vision on boldly and without hesitation, without reservations, and move on to the future. So look for patriots to send to the United States Congress, the United States Senate, and make sure that the message does not die, because the Democrats are just counting, hoping to run the clock out. So are the rhinos. They want to run the clock out and go back to business as usual. We can never go back to business as usual. We got to save this constitutional republic.
Absolutely. And a must read for everybody. First of all, your books, and then Thomas Paine's Common Sense. I'm just telling you, common sense needs to come back. And I think it is with Trump being in administration right now. Don, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Don.
Always so fun. I know you're busy, and I don't know where you're getting all this energy, but more power to you.
I'm glad I'm getting it either. Chick-fil-A helps me with the energy, Donna. I ate some Chick-fil-A portion of mini biscuits. I shouldn't have eaten the bread earlier, but it helped me to get ready for you, Donna. So here we are. God bless you.
There you go. There you go. And thank you guys so much for watching. Continue sending emails, Donna@donnasedge.com. Don, hang around. I need to get you set up for next month. Okay.
Okay. You got it, Donna. You bet.
You guys hang around. Talk to you later. See you next time. Bye-bye.